Hello, this is Miranda from Speaking Through the Fog. I am here with my mother, and this is the family interviews portion of my show. Um, and I'm going to give her the floor to introduce herself.
I'm Miranda's mom, Leah, and I work for the Forest Service as a budget analyst. And when Miranda was younger, I was a college student.
Thank you. That was perfect, Mom. So what was I like growing up, like as a kid? What would you say?
When you were really, really little, you were just energetic and um, played outside a lot. And even when you were a little bit older, you still liked to do outdoorsy things like hiking and camping and fishing and all that stuff. You liked to do pretty much whatever your dad and I were doing, and that usually involved quite a bit of outdoorsy stuff.
So was I at all what you would call a sickly child?
No, I wouldn't call you a sickly child when you were little, but when you got to be like a preteen, I did notice that if you went to a slumber party or something like that, that you weren't able to do what the other kids could do, like staying up all night and eating junk food would usually mean you were going to be sick for a couple of days.
So when did you first start noticing my symptoms from what I have now?
First started noticing when you were pregnant with Emma, the oldest one. Late in your pregnancy, you started having, it seemed, we thought it was really just severe anemia where you were having a hard time, it seemed like breathing. And that was really scary because you could tell you were struggling for breath.
Okay, and were you like worried when I was first sick, or were you just kind of thinking it would pass, or how did you
I was
feel?
definitely thinking it would pass. I mean, because when you were first sick, the episodes were so spread out. It'd be like every once in a while you'd have a dizzy episode, or um, like I didn't notice the cognitive type episodes or the speech. I mean, you never really had too many speech problems back then. It was more or less every once in a while you would get a little bit dizzy or something like that. And because at that time we were having some issues, both you and I, with pre-diabetes, I just assumed it was a blood sugar issue. I didn't really think it was anything else.
Um, I just wanted to bring up from that. You didn't really realize how serious it was either until I passed out the first time in front of you out by the Powells, remember? And I was like, Mom, I've been trying to tell you about it.
Yeah, because you would tell me about episodes you were having at work and stuff, and you would say stuff like, I almost passed out in the pizza oven. And you just say it so casually that I didn't really realize how severe it had gotten. And plus, it's like when you're around anybody who's sick, if it's your day-to-day thing, every level becomes almost your new normal, you know? So I had gotten so used to you kind of having those little episodes that you telling me something like that didn't seem that extreme. But the time outside of Powell's, when I just saw you go white as a ghost and slump up against the side of the building, yeah, that was really surprising to me because I didn't realize how bad it had gotten.
Was that when you first realized my health issues were serious, or when did you first
No, I
realize?
always thought they were serious. I just didn't, it was a matter of degrees. I just didn't realize that you were having that big of a problem with it.
Well, then I guess my question wasn't whether or not it was serious. When did you first realize that this was most potentially going to be a life-altering disease?
I don't even think then it wouldn't have been that episode that really made me think because at that time you were still having like these kind of sporadic, episodic type things. It wasn't like continual. It was really after you went to the sleep doctor and he gave you, what was it?
Nuvigil?
Nuvigil. After you took the Nuvigil and then all of a sudden you were passing out at the drop of a hat. Um, and just without really any warning, um, and in very public places too. that was when I realized that it was much more chronic and much more serious.
So, what was the worst episode of me being sick that you witnessed?
Well, I would still say during that time frame when you were just, it was almost a daily, daily you were almost having problems with just being able to, and you were in the wheelchair at that time too, because you were just at risk of passing out at almost any time.
How has my illness impacted you personally?
Well, like a lot of nights I can't sleep because you will have had an episode or something, and I will be awake at night trying to research and look up things and trying to figure out other treatments or different things we can do. And before we even knew it was CFS, spent a lot of sleepless nights trying to figure out what it could be.
So, how has your life changed since I've gotten sick? Because my life has changed a lot, but
Well, I think part of it is your dad and I both have had to take a much more active role in helping me with the kids than we normally would. Like every day when I come home, pretty much, rather than coming in and kind of relaxing after work, usually it's, um, you know, kind of stepping immediately in and starting to do some childcare.
um, so what is the main emotion you would think would describe that you've had since I've been chronically ill?
My main emotion would be probably just worry, I would say, more than anything, and some kind of sadness, just because I know you're so young and you're at a time in your life when you should be able to do pretty much anything physically that you want to do, and I know you can't do that.
So what worries you? That would be what worries you the most about my illness, right? Or is there something else that worries you more?
No, there's not really anything that worries me more than that. Um, no, I wouldn't say so.
What is the hardest things for you to come to terms with when it comes to my illness?
Well, like recently, like when there were times of the day when you were good, like basically midday or whatever, um, it seemed like, okay, this is something we can deal with. But when it's gotten to the point where you're pretty much having symptoms all day, every day, um, and any little thing can kind of trigger an episode, that's just worrisome.
So what is the hardest thing for you to watch as a parent um, about my illness?
What isn't hard to watch? I don't know everything. As a parent, you feel really helpless because you're used to with your kids being able to fix it or make it better, um, and just not being able to do that, or seeing that you're really tired or whatever, really sick in some way and not being able to do very much at all about it.
So what did you feel when I first told you that I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome?
At first, I felt really relieved to know what it was, and I was happy to finally know what we were dealing with. But then it was like the more I got to know about CFS, the more it wasn't quite as much relief as just concern.
So that leads into my next question. How do you feel now about me having chronic fatigue syndrome?
I feel concerned and yet I feel hopeful because I do think there are things um, that can be done. And I still think that you may have other layers going on with you. So I would be interested to see what comes out of like the neuro-ophthalmologist and different things. And I think the Mayo said anyways that often there's more than one thing that's going on.
And through my research, they said on average, people with chronic fatigue syndrome have 3 or 4 other things
Yeah,
going
yeah,
on at the same time. Not to mention that you're prone to infection and cancer and other things when you have chronic fatigue
right.
syndrome. So, how how do you feel about my doctors and my treatment and what I've received up till now and maybe now or just in general?
Well, at first I was really frustrated, I guess, at a point, because it seemed like at first, the doctors were like, oh my gosh, something's really wrong. We got to get this figured out. And then they send off for all the tests and start sending you to all the specialists. And when there wasn't the proverbial smoking gun or something definitive that they could point to, then they kind of switched and were more like, not even like, we don't know what this is. It would have been easier if they just said, we don't know what this is. But they were like, you know, there's nothing wrong with you, basically. We can't find anything. So then I was really frustrated and felt really helpless and was constantly in a catch 22 because when you were really sick, if you'd have me come in with you, and I just felt like they were kind of bullying over the top of you if I would be like trying to emphasize something, no, this is going on with her, no, that is going on with her. Then they would treat me like I was an overbearing mother and maybe, Munchausen by proxy or something. Maybe I wanted you to be sick, because I was getting attention or something like that, which was not at all the case.
So what's your outlook on my future?
I'm optimistic just because I think at least now that we know what it is, we at least know what to research to try to find some remedies or at least some band-aids for what you have going on. Before, when we didn't know what it was, we were running in a million different directions.
Okay, well, you have about 3 minutes, so if there's anything else you would like to add before I have to wrap it up.
Yeah. Um, Not really. I think another thing that concerns me is just how hard it is on Emma and Ashlyn to see their mommy so sick. I know a lot of times when you've had an episode or something and Emma's alone with you, Ashlyn's kind of a little bit oblivious, although I've even heard her at less than 2 at the time say, okay, okay, mommy. But Emma will come in and she'll go, mommy fainted. And I'm like, what? And I'll go rushing out, and then later she'll go, is mommy okay? And, I'll say, well, mommy's laying down, but that's the other thing is I can't even tell them, oh, no, mommy's fine, because number one, I wouldn't lie to them and I don't want to overly concern them. But then at the same time, I don't want to, dismiss it either. But what do you say to a kid when they ask you that?
Yeah, well, part of the difficulty of having kids with chronic or with parents with chronic illness. So, okay, well, I'm gonna wrap up this interview. Was with my mom, and she was actually the one who actually inspired these interviews. Just by saying you should get a little bit of opinion from the family because it affects them too. So, I definitely one of my primary caretakers is my mother, and so she was really important guest on my show. Like my videos, subscribe to my blog, and hold on. I should have my dad on here if I can whack him all over the head and get him on camera. And the last interview will be with my daughter Emma. I already recorded it, and it's really super sweet and cute. So hold tight and wait for more Speaking Through the Blog.